Welcome to the Streets and People podcast presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. Get Around Cabo Car Free is a volunteer community movement advocating for more transport options for people who can't drive in Caboolture and Morayfield in Queensland. In today's podcast, we'll be covering one of these three broad topics. It might be Road Rules 360, where we discuss Queensland's road rules, the legislation, the design for people walking, biking, in wheelchairs or on a scooter. It might be Not Everyone Drives, where we chat with people whose transport options don't include a car in a car-dependent society. And it might be People and Projects, where our conversations are with people working on a specific aspect of inclusive transportation. Today we're doing one of our Road Rules 360 episodes. My name's Wendy and we're in Gubbi Gubbi country in Caboolture, and I'm here with...
John Burrill is my name.
John, you used to be in the TMR as the guy for all things road rules, and you were just telling me a couple of the quirky stories just a moment ago, but you retired about 6 years ago.
Something like that, 6 or so, yes, years ago.
Like all our episodes, we are here to entertain and inform. You've retired, so you're not giving your professional opinion. We're just having a bit of a yarn, what we reckon. Usually it involves a lot of grumbling. And we thought we had got to the end of all our road rules for bikes, and it turns out we had one more. I had missed it because it's on a different page, because this one is about e-bikes.
Yes.
Which are now pretty common, and I have an e-bike and it's wonderful. And I do see a few different ones around, and actually as we were looking at the page trying to understand it a little bit better, I realised that I see quite a lot that are non-compliant. So I thought that'd be really useful to step through a little bit about.
That's right, yes, there's a lot of non-compliant electric bicycles out there, but that in itself is an incorrect statement, because the moment they become non-compliant, they cease to be bicycles. What they usually become, I mean, the classic example is maybe somebody trying to put a petrol engine on a push bike. What they become is unregisterable motorbikes. Only place you can actually legally ride them is on private property where there's no public access. But having said that, there are various categories of different types of electric bicycles that are legal now to be used on the road. Glad to be here to be able to just have a bit of a discussion about them.
And you've had a bit of my sourdough bread that I made. Yep. Now, the flavour in that one is caraway and something called persicum. Now,
persicum, never heard of it.
Yeah, I love going into Maruka. They have quite a lot of Middle Eastern shops. We come from Western Sydney, where we used to have lots of Middle Eastern shops. Persicum is a particular spice, I guess. It's a type of seed. When you have it, you recognise it in Middle Eastern bread. It's got a particular flavour to it, and you just grind it up and then you add it to the flavouring, and I think it's really delish. We love it.
I knew it tasted different, had a quirky taste to it, but
delicious taste. Delicious. Delicious taste. It was very delicious.
Delicious and quirky.
So it had caraway and persicum, and it was a sourdough gluten-free. So I buy flours. There's a shop down in Morayfield that I won't name, but if you do a lot of home baking, and they have lots of little sweeties as well, you can buy them loose, and it's quite famous here in Caboolture and Morayfield. Right. I would encourage people to look up. They're a really good business. All right, so today we are doing bike riding rules, and we're doing electric bike riding. The page I'm reading from is www.qld.gov.au/rules/safety/wheeled-devices/electric-bicycle-rules. And I got there.
Try typing all that lot in.
I went into the usual bike riding rules, and it turned out that you can find it from the bicycle, skateboards, foot scooter and similar road rules section. That's where it comes from, so you don't have to go through by one.
Well, it's fascinating because each of those links you can click on there is a different set of complications in relation to what rules apply to whatever it is you're riding. It's a minefield, let me tell you now, trying to work through it all, and most people wouldn't even bother. They'd just assume whatever's what and just do whatever they think is right.
So what was interesting in all this is I ride my e-bike. I bought one from a proper e-bike store. It's a store actually that specialises in e-bikes in Brisbane. I went there because I wanted something that I knew I could rely on. Now, it was expensive, and I can can see why people don't buy them through official channels. But I saw that actually now they start to provide finance for people, and it's definitely worth, I think, buying a proper one. It ends up being cheaper when you have a good quality one, and I like that shop because they just know what they're talking about. They're middle-aged.
Yeah. You'd have less trouble with it, and you'd be 100% sure that you've got a compliant vehicle from overseas. Then you're potentially riding or obtaining something that's just not legal to use here.
And the ones, if you buy them in the supermarket, they're designed to be cheap, high sale stuff. I was getting my bicycle serviced last time, and they were on the phone talking with some guy who wanted to get a new battery for his e-bike that he bought at a big box store. And she said, look, we actually don't provide those ones. The battery only lasts 18 months. It's disposable. So the whole bike was disposable because you would have to get the battery from overseas.
That is a disgrace. And that would not be disclosed when the person made the purchase.
If you're spending a couple of grand. Now, I did spend whatever it was, $5,500. Mine was top of the range when I bought it 2 years ago. So I've had no problems with it.
You can get a good motorcycle for that, goodness.
I'm actually a really bad rider. I used to have a Vespa, I said that to you, and people were just greatly relieved when I gave it up because I'm such a terrible driver. This is why I think it's really good that we promote people who don't want to drive, because I know I'm a really bad driver. I want an alternative and we need to improve it. So here we go. Let's step it through. Electric bike rules. An electric bicycle, also known as an e-bike, is a type of vehicle and can be assisted by power when riding. You can ride an electric bike on all Queensland roads and paths except where bicycles are prohibited. When riding, you have rights and responsibilities like all road users. You must follow the bike road rules and obey the general road rules. And we have covered those in our previous episodes. We're not going to go there. You don't need a license to ride an electric bike, and they don't need registration or compulsory third-party insurance. Now, a lot of people go, bikes shouldn't be on the road because they don't have registration. And just a heads up, it's actually more expensive to do that. And in fact, I heard of a place in, I think it was Canada, where they did it until 1953. So between 1939 and 1953 they did it, but it became so financially unviable. It's just a very different experience when you're riding a bike. You can, however, register your bike in case it gets nicked. So there are places where you can get your bike registered, and I think it's really worth doing that.
Oh, that's interesting. I remember a time when the police had a big operation going where they were etching security number on your bicycle, and the police they'd be at bicycle events and they would be there with a little etching pen and put a security number on your bike. Very good.
We're now on a separate page, and it's mypolice.qld.gov.au/South Brisbane/West-End-Serial-Hub. And there you can record your serial number to help police return your bike if it gets nicked. So I'm not going to go through that page. It's available. There's a Google form and it says, where's my serial number? It tells you how to find that on your bicycle. You just complete the Google form.
So the serial number now rather than a particular number. Okay.
I've definitely gotten carried away here. Anything else to add there?
I think what would be a good place to start, and what I have open here, is the definition, the legal definition of a bicycle, because it's interesting and quirky. I'll read it. Okay, so what is a bicycle? Here it is. Bicycle means a vehicle with two or more wheels that is built to be propelled by human power through a belt, chain or gears, whether or not it has one or more auxiliary motors. Now, all of those words are very important.
What's an auxiliary motor?
An auxiliary motor is something that provides an extra level of power. In other words, you have your main source of power, which must be the pedals. Auxiliary motor assists you with that pedaling process. What often happens is, especially with the illegal electric bicycles, is that the electric motor becomes the primary source of power. In other words, just like a motorbike, you sit on it, you twist the throttle or pull the accelerator, whatever it is you do, and zoom, off you go. And you don't even have to use the pedals.
I saw somebody yesterday with that.
I could tell you some tales about work we did when I worked in the department. They were prevalent in a particular part of Queensland for hire, and they were totally illegal because the pedals on them were impossible to use.
Right.
of a kind that you really couldn't get anywhere by using the pedals. And it was pretty obvious that the primary source of power was the motor.
What I think is interesting there is that we rely on, as a consumer, that an organisation,
Yes.
a professional organisation, is going to be compliant. Now, it's different
They're
if
not.
Dave down the corner has sort of jigged something up that he's bought in from somewhere else.
Yeah.
But when an organisation is doing it and
Yeah.
you assume there's insurance, so
Yeah.
you wouldn't have insurance in something like that
No.
because they wouldn't be
It would
compliant.
be, even if there was, that's right. And I think these people, we had the police along with them. But anyway, let me continue with the definition, because there's a list of inclusions and there's a list that a bicycle doesn't include. Fascinating stuff. So a bicycle includes a pedicab, right? Have a little think about that. That's a bicycle with a seat behind it where you can go for hire. In Brisbane, there was an organisation started doing this. It was basically free, and they just relied on tips for the rider, and they would take people. I think they didn't go down very well because they were quite big and they were quite slow. The rest of the traffic didn't like them very much. But there you go, pedicab. Penny farthing.
A penny farthing is one of those ones where you sit very high up on the very...
Huge
I
wheel.
don't, I'm always sitting there going, how would you get up there and then how would you not fall
It's an
off?
art in itself, just getting on the blasted thing and off the blasted thing as well. You wouldn't catch me on the left.
What do you do when you're stuck at the traffic lights? Like
Oh,
if you
put
were
your
to
foot
follow the
down.
road rules on one of those, how would you be? How would that work?
Well, you just have to get off, basically. The moment you stop, you have to get off. And then in order to start again, you have to then slide up and get back onto it. It's an art. Probably look it up, how to get on and off a penny farthing. Okay, and then the next one is a tricycle, self-explanatory, a power-assisted bicycle. And that's where we're going to be heading today, I think, looking at power-assisted bicycles. It also lists here things that are not included in the definition of a bicycle. And I think when they do this, you know that there's a lot of issues to take into consideration and things to sort of work out in your mind, because the list includes a motorised mobility device, a wheelchair, a wheeled recreational device, a wheeled toy, any vehicle with one or more auxiliary motors other than a power-assisted bicycle. One of the things, if you look at the definition of a bicycle, it says 2 or more wheels. So you can have a bicycle with 6 wheels, and I've seen a bar that sells beer and it had about 6 wheels down either side of it. All the people were sitting facing the bar, some on one side, some on the other. Each person had the pedals through chains and gears and everything, and it all fitted the definition of a bicycle. There you go. They used to pedal this bar around drinking soft drinks.
Not.
Or not.
What about a tricycle? Does that fit in the definition of a bicycle?
Yes,
So if
tricycle
it's got
would, yeah.
3, so it's got
3 wheels. Yeah.
two wheels with a basket, often they have now
Yes,
for
that's
adults.
right.
I
Cargo
encourage-
bikes and
Yeah.
those sorts of things often have 3 wheels.
I often encourage people who maybe are starting out, maybe don't have such a good sense of balance, if they've got some ear issues or whatever, or they're just not confident. I always encourage people to go on a trike because I think that's a great way to start. Generally, just doing little runaround stuff around the place.
I think the traditional trike is 1 wheel at the front, 2 wheels at the back. I would personally advise going for the opposite to that. 2 wheels at the front and 1 wheel at the back for stability issues. A lot of parts of Brisbane are quite hilly, and if you're going downhill on one of these things and you want to turn, if you've only got 1 wheel at the front, it is very unstable. If you start to turn, it's very easy to sort of cockle the thing over and end up on your face.
Oh, well, that's very interesting. So if our listener is a designer of bicycle things and is interested, there's a business model for you. You
Yeah.
can have a bit of a go of that. What do you reckon?
I'm sure there are tricycles available with 2 wheels at the front and 1 at the back. It's funny because all of this applies to motorcycles as well, you know. Can't help but get a plug for motorbikes in.
I know. Restrain yourself. We're not doing motorcycle road rules
But
today.
the same principles apply. 2 wheels at the front, 1 wheel at the back is way more stable than 2 wheels at the back and 1 wheel at the front.
We're not talking about that today, John. Sorry. I'm not soz, not soz.
She's not sorry.
I'm not at all sorry. Anything else you want to add about registration or compulsory third party or about...
No, that's all clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Riding an electric bike. You propel an electric bike through pedaling with assistance from the motor. The motor is used to help you maintain speed while riding and may be helpful when riding uphill or against the wind. At speeds up to 6 kilometers an hour, the electric motor can operate without you pedaling. You can do it just the first 6 kilometers an hour.
Yeah. Get you started.
Just to get you
basically.
started, you don't have to be pedaling. The motor can help you when you first take off. At speeds above 6 kilometers an hour, you must pedal to keep the bicycle moving with the motor, providing pedal assist only. And this is where it starts to get a bit more quirky. When you reach a speed of 25 kilometers an hour, the motor must stop operating, it'll cut out, and you need to pedal to stay above 25 kilometers an hour, like a bicycle. Why is it on a bicycle you can go faster than you can on an e-bike? And is that to stop the people basically hooning with a fast motor, or what's the goal?
I think you can still go faster than 25 on an electric bicycle.
As long as you've got the motor off.
Well, the motor will cut out. If it's legal, the motor won't be operating. Downhill, you can go 60 kilometres an hour. If the speed limit on the road is 60, you can go 60 downhill on an electric bicycle, but the motor won't be operating.
Okay.
So there isn't a speed limit as such. It is the same as any other bicycle. It's just the power assistance effectively goes from 0 to 25 kilometres an hour.
With an answer there. All right, source of power. For an electric bike to be legally used on the road, it must have an electric motor and be one of the following: a bicycle with an electric motor or motors capable of generating no more than 200 watts of power in total, and the motor is pedal assist only, and that's called a pedelec. A pedelec is a bicycle with an electric motor capable of generating up to 250 watts of power, but the motor cuts out at 25 kilometers an hour and the pedals must be used to keep the motor operating. Pedelecs must comply with the European standard for power assisted pedal cycles, and that's EN 15194, sorry about that, and must have a permanent marking on it that shows it complies with this standard. Anything you want to just put in there?
Well, I've heard in the past, and probably still do, just buy a standard bicycle and then try fitting it with some kind of aftermarket electric motor. Almost inevitably, you're going to have problems with that. First of all, how do you guarantee that it's 200 watts or less? And when it comes to a pedelec, it's got to have these markings and these verifications actually on it, which if you use an aftermarket motor to put on a standard bicycle, you're going to fall foul of that legislation.
Because I have a friend who's interested in starting a business just to do that, and you can see now why that business doesn't exist elsewhere, because there would be this issue, because then you couldn't get insurance either.
Yes, but I think it depends how compliant you are with what it is you're providing. And I don't know about this, but you might be able to go through a process of getting an ordinary bicycle, putting an electric motor on it, having it verified as being compliant in one of these two categories of motorised bicycle.
My friend, he's thinking of doing that. So where, for instance, would he be able to go?
The first port of call would be the Department of Transport and Main Roads, because they own the rules. They also administer, in Queensland at least, the vehicle standards. You'd have to look at those. There'd be a process that you could go through, but it wouldn't be an easy one. I can tell you now, it's a bit of a minefield, as we've discussed before. Not impossible. I mean, to be quite honest with you, I think if I was somebody who wanted to purchase one of these things, I would go to, somebody who is importing or producing the thing that's been through the proper procedures, got all the patents and all of the necessary compliance features for it to receive all the ticks. So you go to a standard, you go to a purveyor of this type of vehicle.
Okay, so we've got one last little section here, non-compliant electric bikes, and this is what we're talking about here. Your motorised bike is non-compliant and can't be ridden on public roads or paths if it has any of the following: a petrol-powered or internal combustion engine, an electric motor capable of generating over 200 watts that isn't a pedelec, an electric motor that is the primary source of power. For example, if your bike has a petrol-powered engine attached before or after purchase, it is non-compliant.
100%.
If your bike's electric motor can help up to speeds in excess of 25 kilometers an hour without cutting off, it is non-compliant.
Yeah.
If your bike has non-functioning pedals that do not propel the bike that's above 6 kilometers an hour, it is non-compliant.
Yeah.
If you can twist a throttle and ride your bike using the bike's motor power only without using the pedals, it is non-compliant.
Yeah.
Non-compliant bikes may only be ridden on private property with no public access. If a non-compliant bike is to be ridden legally on a road, it must comply with the Australian design rules requirements for a motorcycle and be registered.
And that's it. What I think I said up front there, you know, what a lot of people are riding around on, especially the ones with a petrol engine and a push bike, it's an unregisterable motorcycle. Can only be ridden on private property with no public access. That no public access is important because what you sometimes see is, you know, an empty car park or any kind of a park, and you'll see even to the point where you've got mums and dads with their little kids and they've got the little buzzy little pee-wee motorbike things, unregisterable, and they're buzzing around car parks, but it's still illegal. Even if it's private car park, if there's public access allowed there, then the road rules apply. These rules apply.
Yeah.
So it's got to be your own paddock, basically, or your friend's 5-acre.
Say you've got a farm or you've got acreage or whatever, by all means, do what you want. The minute you set out into anybody else's space, no go. And then you end up with issues of insurance. Say, for instance, this may be beyond your knowledge, but if you have a health insurance and you're riding a vehicle that is non-compliant, does your health insurance cover you for illegal?
I would not have a clue about that. I know that if you're riding a bicycle and you hit somebody and knock them over and injure them, you know, there's public liability insurance that's available, which you can take out personally to cover you in those situations. Most people wouldn't have that, so you're pretty stuck. I mean, don't crash. Don't crash.
Oh, it's just interesting, you know, insurance has become such a big feature of our lives now.
I suppose a little plug for Bicycle Queensland as an organisation. Anybody who's a financial member of Bicycle Queensland automatically has insurance on their bicycle, which is a great thing. This is the sort of thing it would come in handy for, you know, if you know, riding your bike, you have a crash, and even if you're to blame and you cause somebody injury through what you've done, you're still basically insured through Bicycle Queensland.
That insurance doesn't cover if your bike gets nicked or stolen. That doesn't cover that. You have to get separate insurance. I'm a member of Bike Queensland.
Oh, wow.
And I had to buy separate.
I used to be.
We have a bit to do with them. So I thought it would be really useful also to pull up the vehicle classifications that Austroads have recently come out with. They have completely reviewed their vehicle classification. It used to be very narrow, and they've realised that there's a spot of bother with that lately because there are just so many different types of vehicles. This is called Austroads Extended Vehicle Classification Scheme for Traffic and Transport Surveys. So this is only when you're doing a survey, this is what you can use. But as I was looking at this for bicycle and e-bike, and we were talking beforehand, what we realised is that some of this is not so useful because for a bicycle to be in the same space as an e-bike, it makes it difficult because maybe a bicycle, an e-bike and a recumbent bicycle, it's also got there as well. I guess that's quite a similar speed. But when you get down to, for instance, they've got non-road travellers, which includes skaters, skateboards, segways and scooters and e-scooters. Now, the speed obviously of a scooter and an e-scooter is quite different. And maybe it's about whether they're legal or not legal, because that becomes another thing. It was just something to think about. And also you've got those four-wheeled mobility scooters and wheelchairs. They're also classified as the same thing. And I'm not sure that that's such an appropriate way of categorising. I would have thought it would be good to separate out the motorised and the non-motorised, but I guess you end up with 4,928 categories, and one can have too much of a good thing, I feel.
It's very tricky, all that. And I think it's often the case with anything that comes out from a federal agency. You have to then overlay that with whatever is happening locally in whatever jurisdiction you're in. So for us, Queensland, much of what's there in that list and that scheme would be just not correct because we group things in a different way to that chart we've just had a little look at from Austroads.
And I was speaking with somebody on Saturday. He knows all this stuff about road rules, and I just thought, could you actually get better classifications? I don't know whether that would be something.
Well, this is something we've discussed before. Since I left the department, the whole thing of motor vehicles that fall outside of the main categories of motor vehicle have got very, very complicated, much more complicated than it used to be. And I can see kind of the reason behind it, because they want to sort of control what each type of vehicle, where each type of vehicle is allowed to go. But it's so complicated that you get to the point where nobody's going to look it up. Even if you do look it up, you're going to find so many inconsistencies and anomalies that it's going to be hard to put into practice. We were talking earlier, gave a good example. You might be, for example, riding a motorised foot scooter or e-scooter of some kind, and you're travelling along down a particular road perfectly legally, and then all of a sudden you might come to the end of that road or some intersection or crossroads or whatever, and suddenly you can't go anywhere. You're stuck. The only thing you can do is turn around and go back the way you came. That's if you're going to obey the law, because if you progress further along that road or on roads that you're not allowed to be on, which is...
It's really clear that there is a huge overhaul of the road rules needed, because just to say, oh look, that's too hard when it's completely ineffective just doesn't make sense. And there may be some review that's beginning to happen. They're trying to encourage people to use more, non-car transportation. But the road rules certainly don't make it easy, and it would be a huge job to start to break that down for Queensland, and it would make a huge difference. It would become presumably a huge anomaly from all the other states.
Well, it is now. I mean, each state and territory has their own idea of what's legal and what isn't.
Sure.
I think there was an episode we did where we talked about a particular type of vehicle crossing the border from New South Wales to Queensland. There are some cases where you just can't do it, cross the borderline, because you're legal one side of it, you're not legal the other. And that, when you're looking at these non-motor vehicle categories, there's a lot of issues in that respect. Uniformity across the jurisdictions.
You'd need compliance with the Queensland Police, and then you'd need legislation, and then you'd need, Parliament, and then you'd need... can you imagine how challenging that would be? It is time that something needs to be done, because this is pretty bad.
A lot could be done.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. Anything to add before we close out?
I don't think so. I think we've covered it. Electric bicycles, thing of the future.
Absolutely, they are amazing. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for enjoying Streets and People, presented by Get Around Cabo Car Free. We publish our podcast regularly at the usual places and on our website, where you can find out more about us. getaroundcabocarfree.com.au. That's www.getaround, get around, that's pretty straightforward. Cabo, C-A-B-O, that's short for Caboolture. Car Free, C-A-R-F-R-E-E. There's no hyphen in that. .com.au. Our theme music is The Thief on AM Sound, which is just like our cars on our streets, always stealing the space. So let's stop that thief.